Hi, I'm Jeremy Neal, and I'm a professor of philosophy at Houston Baptist University. I want to talk today about a very troubling topic at the interface of environmental and business ethics. And I want to start off by asking you to do a thought experiment with me. Think to all the times when you've been stopped at red lights and you've looked around at the intersections and you've noticed that there's a lot of trash everywhere. It's not just intersections at red lights, it's also public shopping mall parking lots, virtually any public place, parks, zoos, any public place that isn't privately owned, you'll find that there's often a lot of trash, and it's because these are publicly owned lands. They aren't privately owned. And environmental and business ethicists long ago realized that there was a fundamental conflict that's very difficult to resolve between self-interest and the collective interest when it comes to cleaning up public areas. If you think about it, it's not in anybody's self-interest to clean up the trash at intersections or in parking lots that are publicly owned. It is, however, in the collective interest that these areas be cleaned up. It is in the collective interest that we have a nicer, more beautiful set of environmental surroundings to live in. And because of this dichotomy, this conflict between self-interest and the collective interest, various different proposals have been made over the years by environmental and business ethicists for somehow aligning the self-interest of individuals or of businesses, like we say in business ethics classes, and the collective interest of the community. In business, one way of aligning self-interest with collective interests would be for consumers to make choices that are in the collective interests and that make it in businesses' interests to do what is in the collective interest. So when consumers purchase products that are developed or have been produced in environmentally conscious ways, it is very easy for business to switch over and for other businesses noticing that, recognizing where the money is going, to switch over in their production processes and to develop their own products in ways that are environmentally conscious. And thereby to increase their own business success, increase their profits. At the same time, though, motivating consumers to do that can be very difficult because it is not in consumers' self-interest that the collective interest be served. It hurts consumers financially, usually, to purchase products that have been made in ways that are environmentally conscious. It costs them more money. Another way of approaching the topic and trying to align self-interest with collective interest is through governmental regulation. And there are basically two approaches to governmental regulation when it comes to business and environmentally conscious things. One approach is an equality-based approach, which spreads penalties out across all players in particular industries. So for instance, maybe the government imposes penalties upon coal companies that emit a certain amount of toxic carbon emissions into the atmosphere. Maybe the government penalizes them by telling them they can't operate as a coal company unless they agree to abide by governmental regulations. Or maybe the government says you can operate as a coal company, but you have to pay certain substantial penalties if you don't abide by the regulations that we implement. This first approach to governmental regulation of business when it comes to environmental ethics is an equality-based approach, since all of the participants in the particular industry in question, in this case the coal industry, have to participate in a way that abides by government regulations. A second approach is a market-based approach. So the government might say instead, when it tries to regulate businesses, that it wants to give businesses the chance to make their own choices about whether or not to pollute. So perhaps a coal company, alongside other coal companies, could operate in a market. Maybe the government makes available in that market certain pollution permits. If a business, looking at its balance sheet and its financials, decides that it's in its best financial interests to, say, pay a governmental penalty and to limit its emissions, it can do that. But if a business decides that it's in its best financial interests under the second scenario to, say, swap or trade pollution permits with another business, it could do that as well. Maybe the other business, looking at its balance sheet, realizes that it wants to, it's in its best interest financially to pollute, and so this other business might purchase a pollution permit from the first business. And the first business could gain as well from the arrangement by selling its pollution permit to the second business. At any rate, the advantage of a market-based system of pollution permits is very easy to understand. It's that it's more efficient and it maximizes liberty. But its disadvantage is that it's not egalitarian. It doesn't prioritize equality. Liberty and equality then can come into conflict with each other when it comes to environmental regulations and government regulation of businesses. At any rate, the topic of getting self-interest to align with collective interest when it comes to the business and the environment is a very difficult topic to solve, and it is famously identified by the moniker the tragedy of the commons. And if you can solve the tragedy of the commons, then you can virtually pave your own way in business ethics. But it is a very difficult nut to crack, and different proposals have been made, some more successful and some less successful, and all of them very hard to work through and to think about.